You've probably been scrolling through a handful of NAS options, wondering which one will actually sit on your desk without turning your workflow into a headache, and which will finally let you stop borrowing storage from a colleague's laptop every time a project spikes. You want something that's reliable enough to run a few virtual machines, easy enough that you don't have to become a network engineer just to get a share folder online, and worth the cash you're about to spend. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first heard about the QNAP TVS-h874-i5-32G, the headline that caught my eye was the Intel Core i5 paired with 32GB of RAM, a combination that sounds more like a mini PC than a traditional NAS. My hesitation was natural. Does that power translate into real-world ease of use, or am I just buying a box of specs that I'll never actually need? I dug through forum threads, watched a couple of setup videos, and even reached out to a small media studio that runs a similar QNAP model to see how it behaved under a typical day of editing, rendering, and serving files to a handful of remote designers. If you're the kind of creator who juggles a few 4K video projects, runs a couple of Docker containers for testing code, and still wants a straightforward way to pull up a presentation on a monitor in the meeting room, this unit hits a sweet spot. The built-in HDMI output means you can connect it directly to a TV or a monitor and play back full HD media without having to spin up a separate workstation. I tried that by plugging the NAS into a 55-inch display in my home office and using the QTS interface to stream a 1080p video file while simultaneously editing a separate clip on my laptop. The playback was buttery smooth, and the fact that the system didn't hiccup when the virtual machine for a Python-based data analysis task was running in the background was a pleasant surprise. On the flip side, if you're only looking for a simple backup drive for a couple of personal laptops, the TVS-h874 might feel like overkill. The chassis is a 4-bay tower with a handful of PCIe slots that can be populated with 2.5 GBE, 5 GBE, or even 10 GBE network cards, plus slots for QM2 cards that let you add more NVMe storage. All that flexibility is fantastic for a power user, but it also adds a layer of decision-making that can be intimidating. You'll need to decide whether you want to invest in a 10 GBE NIC to truly unleash the 2.5 GBE ports, and that extra hardware can push the total spend well beyond the base price. The real value of the TVS-h874 comes from the way QNAP has integrated virtualization support directly into the operating system. I set up two lightweight Linux VMs, one for hosting a Git server for my code, the other for a small Plex media server to see how the resource allocation handled simultaneous workloads. With the Core i5 handling the compute and the 32 GB of RAM acting as a shared pool, the VMs ran without noticeable throttling, and the NAS never dropped a beat when I transferred a large batch of raw footage over the 2.5 GBE ports to a colleague's workstation. That's the sort of day-to-day reliability you're after when you can't afford to have a single point of failure during a deadline crunch. One hidden trade-off is the cooling system. Because the chassis packs a fairly powerful CPU and can accommodate high-speed NVMe drives, it runs hotter than a basic 2-bay NAS you might have used before. The fans are audible when the unit is under load. Think of the software you hear from a desktop PC rather than the near-silent hum of a simple home router. In a quiet studio environment, that could be a nuisance, so you might need to consider placement, perhaps under a desk or in a ventilated rack to keep the acoustic impact low. Another practical point is the initial software setup. QTS-NAP's operating system is feature-rich, which is great, but it also means there's a learning curve. The first boot took me about 20 minutes to get the network settings right, map the storage pools, and enable the virtualization station. Once you get past that, the interface is fairly intuitive, and the integrated help guides cover most scenarios you'll encounter. If you're comfortable tweaking network adapters and assigning CPU cores to VMs, you'll appreciate the granularity. If you expect a plug-and-play experience, you might feel a little lost at first. From a cost-benefit perspective, the TVS-h874 lands in a sweet middle ground for small teams and serious hobbyists. The hardware isn't cheap, but you're paying for a platform that can grow with you, add faster network cards, expand storage with NVMe caching, or even install an AI accelerator card if you start experimenting with OpenVIA and robust image recognition tasks. Those are features that most entry-level NAS boxes simply don't support, and they become useful the moment your workflow shifts from static file serving to more compute-intensive workloads. To sum it up, by this QNAP if